Presentation by Scott DeLeon, Lake County Director of Public Works, on Measure L. Welcome.
Good evening. Good evening, I'm Scott DeLeon. I'm the Public Works and Water Resources Director for Lake County, and I appreciate the opportunity and invite to come down and talk about Measure L. I'm a county employee. I can come and provide information about the ballot initiative. I'm not here to campaign for it, and we have a group, a committee to save the lake and support Measure L. And I'm not sure if any of them are here this evening. I don't see anyone, but there is a committee, and I'll give some information about that committee and where you can contact them and the website that they created. I think it's important to talk about Measure L, to begin to talk about Measure L by looking back at Measure E, which was the previous measure a couple of years ago that was a half-cent sales tax for lake-related programs. And I think it's important to start the discussion with that and then compare the two. So the first slide is looking at the history of the previous measure. That was Measure E. It was put before the voters in November of 2012. The ballot included Proposition 30. That was a proposed half-cent sales tax by the governor to fund education. And Measure G, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, was a 1 cent sales tax here in the city of Clearlake. The proposed Measure E was a special tax. It required 67% voter approval. The measure failed with 63%. I think it's important to note the difference between a special tax and a general tax and the requirements for each. A special tax is one that the money can only be spent for the specific programs or projects that are delineated or highlighted in that ordinance or in that body of legislation. A general tax is one that can be spent on anything. The governor, when he sold Proposition 30, he said that he was going to put the money to education, and so far he's lived up to that promise, and he's put a lot of money into the educational system in the state of California. But at any time, he could decide that I'm going to take the money and move it somewhere else. It's his prerogative to do that because it was a general tax. Again, considering Measure E, the proposed measure had the following breakdown of funds. It provided specific percentages for invasive species, aquatic weeds, and algae. It was 88% was proposed, 9% for water quality control programs, 2% set aside for matching funds and capital improvement projects, and 1% for the annual audit. The half-cent sales tax is projected to generate $2.4 million annually, and at the bottom there you can see the breakdown of what those percentages would generate for those specific projects and programs. Excuse me. Again, continuing to talk about Measure E, there were a number of criticisms of Measure E. The expenditure plan was too vague, and it only focused on weeds, algae, and invasive species. Well, from the previous slide, it had proposed 88% of the funding was going to go to those particular programs. The Oversight Committee was going to be hand-selected by the board, and it had too many politicians. The Measure E proposed an Oversight Committee that would review the proposed expenditure plan. The Oversight Committee, it was argued that it was going to review the expenditures after the fact, and then kind of the common theme is the money was going to get absorbed into the general fund and it wasn't going to go into those programs. So looking at Measure L and some of the differences and the changes that have been made to Measure L, the measure requires the expenditure plan be submitted to the Oversight Committee and the board in the spring prior to the adoption of the fiscal the budget for the next fiscal year. The ordinance says 90 days prior to the adoption of the budget. It's quite likely that we're going to need to do that a lot of days before, even, I mean, maybe 120 days before the adoption of the budget, because I suspect for the first year or two, the process of getting to the expenditure plan may take more than 90 days. But it's clear that you have to submit the expenditure plan well before the adoption of the budget. The Oversight Committee, there's a little more clarification on that. It's made up of citizens from both the county and both cities. The board will take nominations from existing committees and groups, including the City of Lakeport, City of Clearlake, the Invasive Species Council, Farm Bureau, etc. The total number of folks on the Oversight Committee is 11. The Oversight Committee meetings are subject to the Brown Act, so we advertise, they're open to the public. And probably one of the biggest changes is there's no program-specific percentages. The annual plan will detail the proposed expenditures in the following areas: water quality programs, invasive aquatic species, prevention and control of aquatic weeds and algae, and the development of reserves for capital projects. So instead of percentages of funds going into specific things, it's left a little open, and so the areas of the different types of projects, water quality, invasive species, etc., there will be expenditure plans that will detail how much of the money will go to each of those specific types of programs. The expenditures are audited annually by either the county auditor controller or an outside firm to ensure compliance. The measure has a 10-year sunset clause, which will require another vote of the citizens if they want to extend the sales tax. The measure was, again, intentionally written with some flexibility to provide options for the various programs. So instead of percentages or specific projects or programs, it's left intentionally a little vague to provide that flexibility. Because 5 years from now, we really don't know what the main problem might be. It might be invasive species. It might be something that we're not aware of. And so as long as the problem is within the purview of the Watershed Protection District, then it would be an eligible expense. And we're going to get to the Watershed Protection District in I guess, the next bullet. The funds can only be spent on the programs listed in the measure. The funds cannot be diverted to the general fund. The program, or the ordinance is very specific that the funds are going into the Watershed Protection District. And the Watershed Protection District is a legal entity that was created. The board of supervisors sit as the directors of the Watershed Protection District. And the roles and responsibilities and the function the function of the district are well defined. And basically it's water quality, protection, improvement, enhancement of waters within the district. And the district boundaries are the county, and they're inclusive of the cities. And the funds can only be spent on programs that are under the purview of the Watershed Protection District. What's unique about that is the general fund could put money into the Watershed Protection District to run a program, but they can't take funds out of the Watershed Protection District and put them into the general fund. That can't happen. So that safeguard has been put into the measure so that the funds can only be spent on programs related to the Watershed Protection District. And that's in direct response to the criticism that, well, the money's going to go somewhere else. By law, it can't. The measure provides funding for current programs, as well as provisions for stormwater monitoring, funding for the Middle Creek Marsh Project, and set aside funds for matching future grant opportunities. In this measure, we've proposed a one-year expenditure plan, and it's proposed. It would still need to go through the whole process of the plan would need to be developed. It would need to go to the Oversight Committee, and the Oversight Committee would need to review it. Ultimately, we'd go to the board with some recommendations, and the board would approve the expenditure plan. In the year one proposed draft expenditure plan, there's the breakdown of what we're proposing. Lake and stream monitoring as required by the state and federal permits, our TMDL, NPDES stormwater permits all require monitoring and reporting, and what we're proposing is the work to accomplish that. Burns Valley Creek Dredging and Stream Bank Restoration Project. It's a project that your staff has been attempting to get funded through grants for a few years now and hasn't had a lot of success getting those grants. Grants are hard to fund. I mean, they're just very difficult to obtain anymore. And as proof by, I mean, that's a good project, and we're having troubles getting it funded. We've submitted some very good projects to the state and their 319H grant program and have not had a lot of success. So, you know, having some additional funding is going to take away that reliance on grants. And grants, again, are very competitive and they're very difficult to get. The other thing about grants, just a little aside here, the days of you get 90% of the cost of your project and all you had to put in was 10%, those days of those 90-10 grants are few and far between. Those are very, well, I don't know if they exist anymore. Most grants today are reimbursement type grants, and you can still get, you know, 87 to 90% of reimbursed funds, but you have to have the money up front to do the project. So if you have a $100,000 project, back in the day, you used to be able to apply for a grant, and as long as you could come up with a 10% match, you could get the $90,000, and you could go do your project. Now you have to have the $100,000 to do the project, and if you apply for the grant and you get it, you can get reimbursed, but if you don't have the money, then you're not going to be able to get the grant. So the whole climate of grants has really changed. I mentioned the project, a wetland development project that we had proposed down in the Keys. That was a 319H grant project, and if we had some funding, we'd be able to do that. And then we're proposing to put some money aside for the Middle Creek Marsh project. Middle Creek, when that project happens, the county's share of that project is $8 million, and we don't have that money. We haven't even started saving that. So there's a pretty big local match for that project, and currently there's no way to fund that. So we're proposing some money set aside for that project. Probably the top priority of what we're proposing for year one is invasive species prevention. And right now what we're proposing is mechanical ramp control. It would be an extension and expansion of our current program. And it would provide that barrier, that physical, mechanical barrier from boats that haven't complied with the program from getting onto the lake. Because once they've gotten into the lake, it's too late. And so we're proposing that we put in some ramp control. There's a couple ways to do ramp control. One's with people. There's some drawbacks to that. Number one, it's very expensive. Number two, it really limits the public's access. You know, you can't have people out there 24/7, and so the access to the lake really gets impaired by your ability to put people out there. So what we're proposing is mechanical ramp control. We believe the technology is there. The community of Hidden Valley controls the access to their subdivision through mechanical means. We think that the technology is there to be able to accomplish that. I should point out too that the beauty of mechanical ramp controls is even though there's a fairly high upfront cost to get started, the annual costs thereafter are a lot less than having people out there because you're just basically dealing with operations and maintenance. We've also proposed some money to be put into aquatic weeds and algae mitigation. This is basically an extension of the programs that we've been running the last few years on the lake using money that the board had set aside, and we're basically run out of those funds. I think this might be one of the last years we're able to do weed abatement. Some examples of future projects. Under water quality programs, stream restoration and modification projects to provide detention areas for sediment reduction. I'm sure you've all seen pictures, the satellite photos of the big plumes of sediment coming from the creeks, and a lot of that, you know, you can potentially reduce that by slowing the water down, by having some upstream detention areas where the water slows down, a lot of those nutrients and the sediments settle out. projects like that would be something that we would want to pursue. A project we've had on the books for several years now is the Highland Springs Conjunctive Use Project. Basically what that project is a modification to the outlet structure at Highland Springs that would allow us to store more water in the reservoir for release later in the season. And what that would do is significantly improve the groundwater recharge. And considering the drought conditions that we're in right now, the groundwater has been moved to the front burner. It's a top priority thing. And gosh, it'd really be nice if we had that project in place, because we'd be in a little better shape with some of our groundwater if we had that project. As a kind of secondary benefit to that project would be the release of water in the creek to potentially help with habitat for the Clearlake hitch that use Adobe Creek for their spawning activities. Expanded groundwater basin management, again, a very hot topic right now with the state. The state of California is making noise that they want all local entities to be monitoring their groundwater. And we do some groundwater monitoring now. We have 5 or 6 basins that we check the well levels a couple times a year. But the states, we don't know what the state is going to be requiring of local entities, but this would be an example of a project that we could fund in the future. Expansion of the Invasive Species Program, boat cleaning facilities, the board of supervisors. I put that second bullet on there because there's been quite a bit of discussion at my board about the development of choke points and controlling boat movement into the county. It would be something that we could explore in the future for future projects. One of the things that's important to note about choke points is even with choke points, you really need to have the ramp control, which is why we've been proposing the ramp control. It would just be the natural progression of the program. And then under weed and algae, I read every day about alternative energy projects and anaerobic digesters using algae and different products to create energy. And to pursue things like that, you have to have some seed money. And I think that would be a reasonable project to try to pursue in the future. And again, these are just examples of projects. And and some of the talks that I've made over the last few evenings, people have said, hey, well, what about this and what about that? And they've actually had some really good ideas for projects. And the beauty of this whole process is people could come to the oversight committee and make proposals. So they could come to my department and give us proposals for projects, and it would be things that we could then take and start looking at. So again, public would be encouraged to propose projects for us to look at. So why do we need a sales tax measure? Right now, our current revenues don't support the programs. My department's been working, we've been in deficit spending 2 years in a row now, and we just turned in a budget here a couple weeks ago, and we're in deficit spending again this year, and we're using reserves to fund our program. And as you can imagine, that's not sustainable. And so our current revenues they don't support the programs that we have now, and they certainly aren't going to support an expansion of those programs. The state and federal agencies continue to add programs and conditions on water quality that require action. They're not making it easier, and so these programs require monitoring, they require a lot of work, and frankly, we're not doing a lot of the things that they're asking us to do because we just don't have the funding. So our current revenues just don't support these programs. The public demands for increased services, and I mean, we hear it every day, just like you do. The public demands more stuff. They demand better water quality. They demand a lot of things, and to comply with those, it requires funding. The need to provide increased level of protection against invasive species. Yeah, it's the 4th bullet down. It probably should be the top bullet because, frankly, in our department, that is the #1 priority. Is we need to create a much more robust invasive species prevention program. We can live within our means, but that will require a reduction in services and no advancement in invasive species programs. Continuing on why we need it, I just got done saying we need to improve and advance our invasive species program. If you've ever heard a talk about invasive species, you know that they're going, if they get in the lake, they're going to do a lot of damage. And they're going to really impact not only the ecosystem, but they're going to impact a lot of things. And property values, the fishery, a lot of things are going to be impacted negatively. And I think the bottom bullet is really important. You know, the cost of water purveyors is going to go up because they're going to have a lot of maintenance, they're going to have a lot of cleaning and things that they're going to have to do to their systems as a result of those mussels being in the lake. And they aren't going to eat those costs, they're going to pass those costs on to the people that they sell water to, which are you and I. So if you are on a water system that pulls their water, their raw water from the lake, you can expect that their increase in costs are going to get passed along to you. Some advantages of sales tax measure. The sales tax applies only to the purchase of goods and not groceries, utility bills, rental or mortgage payments, or prescription medications. The sales tax will get paid when visitors purchase goods in Lake County. And I think that's important because people come to the county, they're going to our wineries, they're going to other places in the county and buying things. They're going to be helping contribute to the effort by paying that additional sales tax. I mentioned earlier the Committee to Save the Lake, and there at the bottom is the website that the committee has put together. It's www.savethelake.info. A lot of great information on that website. The ordinance is there. The full text of the ordinance is there, and I would encourage anyone if they're interested in learning more about Measure L, to go to that website and take a look at that. All right, and so with that, I'll be happy to try to answer any questions. And again, I really appreciate the opportunity to give you some information about Measure L. Thank you.
Anyone from the public like to ask Mr. DeLeon anything on his presentation?
Yes, I'd like to make a comment. My name is Skip Wilson. My name is Skip Wilson. I talked to Scott Leon a couple of years ago about the condition of the lake. In Moscow, Russia, they have 4 water sources for their drinking water. The Moscow River, an underground river, a man-made lake, and a natural lake. The man-made lake had the same problem this lake did with the stink and all. In 60 days, they solved the problem permanently. Well, I talked to Scott DeLeon about it. His response was, well, Clearlake is so big and all. I brought up Lake Baikal. Are you people familiar with Lake Baikal? It's in Siberia. It's more than twice the size of the state of California. It took them 90 days to come up with a solution to clean it up, and they cleaned it up. The answer isn't more taxes. We're being taxed to death already. The answer is efficiency. And the problem could be solved very quickly. It's just having the right people do the right job.
Thank you. Anyone else?
How did Lake Tahoe go about cleaning up Lake Tahoe? Did they pass a tax? Not that I know of. So why are we passing a tax or trying to pass one?
I understand.
Why don't we get some free money like them?
I understand everyone's frustrations, but let's try to keep it to the questions about the measure itself. If you have questions on the measure, his presentation tonight.
My question is, There's going to be administrative fees associated with administrating any program. What percent of the sales tax is going to be used for those?
Sure. The current funding for the department is going to remain. So what would happen is you have staff to run programs.
Right.
Okay? And what would happen is the funding that is going into the Watershed Protection District would be used, right now it's being used for staff and to do programs. So what would happen is you would take the funding that is being filtered off and is going to programs, and it would run the operation of the district. It would pay for the staff. And the funds that were generated by the Measure L would be going to the programs. So there isn't going to be, there isn't a percentage that's going to be taken off the top to go into administration.
So then what you're saying is that 100% of the tax, if it passes, will all go to the different programs that you stated in your presentation?
Yes, yes. Well, programs require people.
I know that.
Okay, so the money is going to go to the programs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and the funding of the people is going to be funded by the existing revenue from the department.
So the county is going to pick up the funding for...
Not the county, the Watershed Protection District that currently receives revenue. They're the ones that are going to pay, that the Watershed Protection District is going to pay for the staff.
And this tax will be part of the watershed district.
That's correct.
So therefore, I'm back to the original question.
Okay.
Because anytime you get a group of money and a group of people that have to be paid, and all this money is thrown into a pot.
And what I'm telling you is they are going to get paid out of the current revenues from the Watershed Protection District.
Well, if the tax passes, then that will be current revenue.
Okay. But the revenue that was already there doesn't go away. So that's going to pay for the staff.
So you're going to have two different pots that it's going to come out of. The tax money and then the existing fund that's there.
That's correct. Yes, absolutely. It would have to be that way. There would be accounts for the different. In fact, there already are accounts for the different types of funding that come into the Watershed Protection District. So there would be an additional line item account number for the revenue that was generated by the sales tax. Absolutely, it would be separate.
So then 100% of the money that you receive from the tax, if it passes, would go to the program.
And what I'm telling you,
there would be no pay out of it, no nothing out of it.
Right now, I can fund the number of people in my department with the revenue that I'm getting. So right now, if the measure passed today, and I proposed, and that expenditure plan was approved, I would need to add more people. So I could fund those people out of the current revenues out of my Watershed Protection District budget. And the funds from Measure L would go to those specific projects. Yes. Now, the reason I'm hesitant and saying, and I can't tell you 100%, because let's say 5 years from now, 2 years from now, I don't know, pick some time in the future.
Or even a year.
And there's all the community, the oversight committee, the board of supervisors, they decide that we want to put these choke points out in the lake, or out in the entrances into the county. Those are going to require people. All right? My revenues right now would not support that. So the revenues from this measure would then need to be used to fund that program. So the answer to your question is, can I guarantee you for the life of this measure that 100% of these funds is not going to go to staff? I can't do that because I don't know in the future what the programs that people are going to want. But for right now, if the thing were to pass and we were to start doing programs with the staff that I have, I would say 100% of those funds would go to the projects.
For how long?
I
Don't know.
if I don't have to put people out on the highways, maybe for the whole 10 years. If I don't have to put people at the ramps to control the boat movement, if I don't have to do that, then maybe for the whole 10 years. But if the sentiment is, no, we want people out there, because more people working, we're creating jobs. I mean, there's some positive things to having more people. I don't know what the future's going to hold for me.
The thing is, I can see creating jobs for people because jobs are desperately needed in Lake County. But I can't see taking tax dollars from us to pay for your jobs.
Yeah, no, I get that. And you know, the thing about the expenditure plan is it's got to be detailed. It's got to show where those funds are going. And that's a publicly reviewed thing. So, if I showed up at the year 3 and I proposed adding 20 people on my staff, I better have some pretty good justification for doing that.
Well, I know how some projects can get out of hand, and it's no actual funds out of the fund for employees. The next thing you know, it's 10%. Next thing you know, it's 20%. Next thing you know, it's 50%. Now you end up at a 60-40, and the project is basically getting zero.
Right. Well, the thing about that is every year that proposed expenditure plan would have to go in front of the public. And you would have the opportunity to review that and see how much money is going to staff expenditures and how much is going to project expenditures.
Yeah, but at that time it wouldn't do any good because we would still have 7 or 8 years down the road that we would be paying for your employees.
Well, like I'm telling you,
Your employees.
you would have the opportunity to review that before that was ever approved.
And Doug, they're not my employees because I am not affiliated with the county like he is.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Stella. Anyone else from the public on this item of the presentation?
Hi, my name is Mike Dunlap. I'm not here to campaign for Measure L, but I do have some disagreement with the presentation that was made, and I'd like to clarify a few things. The Watershed Protection District has existed as a separate legal entity in the state of California, in the county of Lake, since 2005. The directors of the Watershed Protection District are the Board of Supervisors. So that has existed for 9 years, and it has had income for 9 years. Tax dollars, okay? Over $500,000 goes to the Watershed Protection District every year at this point. And the Watershed Protection District, other than partial employees, doesn't have any bodies other than the directors, the Board of Supervisors. They get paid $150 a month, each of them, every month, regardless of whether or not they take any actions on behalf of the Watershed Protection District. This has gone on for 9 years, okay? Part of Mr. DeLeon's salary is taken from Watershed Protection District Fund, okay? And part of it comes from the general fund of the County of Lake.
That's not true. I don't get any salary from the general fund.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Well,
Scott's, he has salary coming from other funds in the county other than the Watershed Protection District, because he wears more than one hat as well. The Watershed Protection District is not just for the water, okay? Water is not the only issue. It is also a land use issue, because what happens on the land affects the water. So the money can be spent not just on water projects, but on land projects, land use projects. What has been presented tonight in the PowerPoint have been proposals. There are no plans. Okay? Plans are specific. What's up there is proposals, and plans will come later. The weed and algae, the comments that were made about the weed and algae and that the current monies don't support the weed and algae abatement project, that's essentially a threat. The county has spent money, discretionary funds, on weed and algae abatement in the past, and they have the capability of doing that in the future. The county, not the Watershed Protection District. Still the Board of Supervisors, the same 5 people, just twist their hat 30 degrees and they become the Watershed Protection District. But the county has put money available for the weed and algae abatement program in the past, and they have the ability to do that in the future. To live within their means, you know, it's like, yeah, we all have to live within our means. And this district, the Watershed Protection District, which has existed for 9 years, has had the ability to levy taxes and fees. Okay? Now, taxes, like the sales tax that is being proposed, would require going to the voters for a 66 2/3% approval. The fees do not. Okay? The Watershed Protection District for 9 years has probably had the power to charge a fee for access to the lake to help support itself. Now, there's been some argument about that, but it's been proposed as much as 4 years ago, and it hasn't been pursued. This sales tax is not the only method of funding the Watershed Protection District that's available to the county, to the taxpayers, to the Board of Directors, to the Board of Supervisors. You need to be informed. And oh, by the way, you can read the ordinance on the county website. You don't have to go to the one that's up there.
Anyone else on this item?
We had this meeting Tuesday night at the youth center, town hall meeting. Unfortunately, we only had about 8 people show up. It's too bad the community can't get more involved in things like this. One of the things we talked about was, one of my concerns was the ramps, the gates at the ramps. And through the discussion, one of the issues came up was all the private ramps. And one of the ideas was that to create an ordinance to require all the private ramps to be held responsible for any boats that are launched without inspection stickers. So I think that's something that the city is going to have to think about if this passes, to create an ordinance to require these private ramps to be held responsible.
Rick Mayo, citizen of Clearlake. With all tax measures, I believe, and this is part of the statement, it would take, if it passes, it would take a year, at least 1 year, before you will realize any tax dollars in order to pursue any of your proposed programs. So here's a hypothetical for you. How much money do you think in 1 year that you would generate in order to fund those proposed programs that you just outlined?
It's kind of a question, but I'm not sure it can be answered here.
Could you repeat that? What how much money?
How much sales tax money do you think you would generate if this passed in 1 year to fund those proposed projects? It's a it's kind of loaded, but
No, it was in the presentation. The estimate right now is 2.4 million annually.
2.4 million annually. Okay. And you would be able to fund all of those proposed programs with 2.4 million to clean up the lake?
Well, we showed the breakdown of the proposed projects, and the goal is to improve water quality in the lake, yes.
And just using the current staff that you already have
Yes.
is made up of how many people?
5.
Amazing. Thank you.
Anyone else on this item? Seeing no one?
Mayor?
You've already spoke on this item, Mr. Dunlap.
I'd just like to make a correction.
You've already spoke.
So would you rather have the public have misinformation from one of the gentlemen that came up here and spoke?
But you've already spoke on this item.
So are you not going to allow me to make
I
a
am
correction? There you go. Thank you. That's what I wanted to hear.
I'm closing public comment, and I'm bringing it back to the council. Councilmember Overton.
Well, we had a lot of interaction last night, huh, Scott? Way more than this. Some of the things is, I think what needs to be really clarified is, Scott, you're saying that you could use your employees to do these programs, and I don't believe that that's correct. That's kind of what the information I feel like I'm getting, and I think that's what it is. I mean, if there's programs that go on, you're going to have to hire other people to help with those, clean the lake, or clean the Burns Valley Creek. I mean, there's people going to have to be hired to do those. That's part of the program.
Absolutely. Those are
So-
construction projects, or those you're hiring
Right.
contractors to do the work.
Right.
Absolutely.
So
We're
when
talking
people-
about managing these programs.
Right, so when people ask about staff, I think that's what they're trying to get out of there. Yes, there is going to be other staff that will be hired, that this money will be used for in order to make sure the projects go through. Another thing that I was, when we're talking about fees and stuff, one of the things, and I just want you to kind of make a note of this, we're talking about the gates, and we're also talking about the private uses of a lot of these other docks that we cannot, put gates on. I think maybe there needs to be, especially like at our gates, where we don't have to man them at all, but there is a scanning system that when they get their boats inspected, on that inspection sticker is a scanner. And that, in order for them to get into the gate, they must scan it, along with a $2 fee or something that other places charge, could be added on to that scanning thing, to the scanning document. That, so I think that might be a way to, because we have people that are going to come in, or are we going to have somebody go down there and open up this gate at 5 o'clock in the morning for a boat tournament, when the reality is there are going to be people there inspecting. If they had the scanner, they would be able to scan that and actually open up the gate without any personnel, where it may cost us, as we say, all these programs cost up front, but on the down the line would save us on staff. We would never have to staff that. So that's just a thought I thought I'd throw out there as people were talking. I just kind of thought that this is maybe a way to cure the staffing part of that. So that's all I can say. Thank you.
Anyone else in this item?
I just wanted to thank Scott for coming down. And I didn't make you mad on this trip. Last time you was here, I made you mad.
Actually, you didn't make me upset
Oh, good.
at all.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for.
Vice Mayor Christina Dixon.
Thank you. Yes, and thanks for coming down. I appreciate the presentation. I want to do some clarifying too. When you're talking about projects, those are contracted out. You would contract with a construction company who would bring on their own employees. They wouldn't become employees of the county in any way. So yes, there would be other people who would work on these projects, but they would not be hired and then become staff members of the county. Therefore, there would be no administration costs in that way put on this funding. So based on the first couple of slides, I can't remember, you have to do 90 days proposed prior to the fiscal year. So basically, and I think someone else is saying it, none of these programs would be able to start until the following fiscal year, because our fiscal year is coming right up here in a minute. So
Right.
we don't have 90 days left until it, so.
Right. Exactly. And the funding, if the measure passed in June, the funding, we probably wouldn't start seeing funding until January of 2015. So it's going to give us some time to put all these put everything together for an expenditure plan to start, would be July 2015.
So in the meantime, what's the plan for maintaining and I feel very fortunate that we have zero mussels in our lake at this point and would like to keep it that way. But a year is a long time to wait for the funding to get some real hard-nosed programs in place to keep that from happening. What's the plan?
Well, we're pretty much business as usual, and we're going through training right now with our inspectors and our screening participants, and just getting everybody kind of re-engaged as the boating season is upon us. And we work collaboratively with Fish and Game and or Fish and Wildlife, the tournament directors. You know, we have he's an extra help employee, but he works every day on just exclusively for the Quagga Mussel program, and has done a great job for us in the couple of years that he's been with us now. So a year and a half he's been with us. So we're just continuing with outreach and just continuing to do the things we're doing.
I think you're doing a terrific job.
Well, thank
As a
you.
matter of fact, my boat's broken down, and I took it into the shop.
Just to elaborate on that, on Scott's efforts, but we work hand in hand with Scott quite a bit here in City of Clearlake. Most everything we do here in City of Clearlake is done on a voluntary basis. And we have a pretty good group down here. We do piggyback off all the bass tournaments, and our volunteers go down there and help out. We have actually 2 of our employees, city employees, going down tomorrow to get certified, recertified, and just to help out. And then we, so our guys have eyes and ears down the ramps as well. I concur with Scott. He needs help. We need help. The county needs help. There is no way to take care of this problem with what we have. We don't. You guys see our budget. We don't have a lot to offer. We do as much as we can to help Scott, and it's not much, but it's something. So I support it. And that's one of the reasons I asked him to come down here to go over this with you guys.
We need it. Well, yeah. My boat repairman asked me if I have a sticker. I'm like, is that a prerequisite of fixing my boat? But and the last question that I have, and thanks for saying that, because that ties right into it. What are the intentions, or how do you plan to work with the city of Clearlake? And oftentimes the perception is when money goes off to the county, it doesn't end up being spent in Clearlake, and we get the brunt of it, although we have more people and more access area to the lake. So I just want to have it be put out in public knowledge. What sort of intentions do we have to make sure that it is being utilized within Clearlake as well as the rest of Clearlake?
Well, you folks have probably one of the highest use ramps in the lake, and City of Lakeport obviously has some nice ramps at their park. Canocti Vista, we see a lot of boats being launched there. But we see a lot of boats being launched out of Clearlake. A lot of tournaments run out of Clearlake. And as Doug mentioned, he and I have known each other for a long, long time, and we've worked well together for as long as he's been in his capacity here with the city, and since I joined the county in 2010. So I can just assure you that we worked collaboratively and cooperatively for the last 4 years, and plan on continuing that relationship. And yeah, I mean, what's good for Doug's operation and the city of Clearlake is good for me too, because it takes that ramp or that facility. I know that facility's in good shape, and like I said, we've worked well together for a number of years. We'll continue that.
Councilmember Spitler?
I too want to thank you, Scott, for being here. It's been a long journey to put this measure together. It failed the first time, and I think that Your staff has worked really hard to appease some of the things that were concerns of the community, the Citizens Oversight Review Board and things like that. I think make it a lot more comfortable when citizens know they can participate. I would like to see a little more money down at the lower end, lower arm of the lake, but I am happy that the Burns Valley Creek is being addressed in the first spending of such monies. I know that the restoration of the Kelsey Creek is really important too. A lot of people aren't following that and don't really know about it, but that will also help with some of the nutrient overflow once we restore those wetlands. So I know one of the first words out of someone's mouth when they know you're in public service or probably in your line of work, what are you going to do about the lake? Well, you know, this is the first step, I think, in rationalizing what are we going to do is create a plan and generate the revenue to fill that plan. I think in your presentation, maybe some slides of what a lake looks like when the quagga mussel has contaminated it. You won't walk on the beaches. It's like broken glass. You won't be able to walk on the beaches. It smells terrible. The tax compared to what you would be paying for water if we get a contamination like that is extremely minimal. So I just want to thank you for your presentation and
Thank you, Doug.
Scott, your presentation is very well, and I do appreciate it. One thing that maybe we should mention is, and it was mentioned at last night's presentation, was that it takes us 3 to 5 years before we see the mussel effect if they get into our lake. And that is why most of the time, by the time we know they're in there, it's in these communities that have gotten it, it's almost too late because they reproduce so quickly and so fast. And so, that's one thing I think that people need to realize is, it's like we don't have them and we don't want them because by the time we find out that that they're already in the pipelines, that's where they start growing is in the pipelines. I think we still have the pipe out here.
It's right over here.
Okay, all right, so we still have the pipes over here that shows what happens if we get those in our pipelines. And that's a very good scenario because I've seen some of the pictures from Michigan and stuff. So I just want to put that out that it takes a while before we even really see them. So if we don't make sure as they're moving up our California state here, now that we've got them in California, they will continue to move up if we don't do some kind of guard on them. So I do appreciate what you do already though.
Well, I'm not sure if I can appreciate you anymore than the council has already stated. So thank you again for giving us your time this evening, giving us, in my eyes, very clear examples of how this is going to work. I do commend the county, just like we sit here and try again to succeed. You guys are as well. And I do hope it succeeds for you this time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again for the opportunity.